Okay, so I want to start off by talking about your new, or I guess newish album Drive. In May, right? So it's not new anymore. So you wrote this album while on the road, in the back of cars, on planes, on trains. So, how do you think, while traveling, how did that influence the music on this album? How did that influence the sound of this album?
I think traveling is some of the best inspiration you can get. Okay. I've always found that when you go and, go into your studio, 9 in the morning, cup of coffee ready, you're probably not going to write a hit because it's too clinical. It's a
completely different experience.
It's too staged sometimes in the studio, whereas when travelling, you're kind of out in the world and seeing and hearing stuff and different influences. That to me is much more conducive to writing music than sitting in a studio.
Would you say it's more organic to write music?
Yeah, because it happens naturally. So, you don't sit in a car and plan to write music, but sometimes you may get a melody in your head, you hear something on the radio.
And then you get inspired by what you're seeing on the road.
Yeah, and you grab your laptop, you write for an hour, and that may be a song you've done. So it's just a more organic way of writing music for me. And to be honest, most of the stuff I write now, I may finish it in the studio, but I almost definitely will start it somewhere else.
On the road?
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the reasons I love Drive so much is it's such a departure from Northern Lights. Like Northern Lights was all trance, non-vocal, and Drive is all melodic stuff, vocals. So, why did you decide to take that huge, 180 and completely go in a different direction for your second studio?
I don't know. I don't want to disagree with you too much. I don't think they are that different. I think the sound has evolved, but
it's not as trancey though. Drive.
Well, the BPM is lower, and if you were to put it into a genre box, which I generally try not to do, you'd probably call it more melodic house than trance. I agree. But then if you look, say the first single of Northern Lights was Sanctuary,
exactly,
and the first single of Drive was You, and in terms of those two records, I don't think they're that different. They both got kind of like a sweet female vocal, big breakdown. And Drive has more vocals, and it's kind of it's a little bit more of a radio record, definitely. But for me, it was just the evolution of my sound, and I think song-wise, I've always written the similar kind of songs, similar sort of melodies, but the way I produce it just moves with the time. And when I make an album, I've got to make stuff that I want to play in my own sets. And the great thing about Drive is I can play every track in that album in a set. I can do a set and drop all 10 tracks.
So would you say that you're trying to move away from trance now, or is that?
No, I never really go into it on a genre level. I'll make music based on who is inspiring me at that moment. So, right now, the kind of guys whose sound I love and who inspire me would be W&W, Ashley Warbridge, Vice, Tony Clay tonight. I fucking love their sound. Now, would you call guys like W&W and Ashley Warbridge trance? Some people would, some people wouldn't. So
depends, yeah.
For me, I try and leave that debate to say the YouTube comment section, where people will talk for days and days about this stuff and go, if it inspires me and it's something that I think is worth me writing and presenting to the world, then regardless of what genre it sits in, I'll make it.
Okay, and so Drive is a pretty heavy vocal album. Yes. So when you're going to write a song, do you know beforehand if it's going to have vocals or not, or is that something that comes, after you've already written it?
Generally, I'll know at the beginning. I'll kind of make things for a vocal, or I'll go, this will be an
you'll construct it to have vocals from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. And often it begins with the song. So often you start Dynamite. There was no music before the song. Me and Christina sat down and said, let's try and write a follow-up to Concrete Angel, which was obviously a difficult task.
Huge task.
We came up with the chorus first, then we wrote the verse, and then all the music came after. The song was written on an acoustic guitar, traditional style. Whereas other stuff say Long Way Home was never going to be a vocal track. It was just, the nice kind of play-out track of the album. Firebird was always going to be an instrumental. That's probably one of my favourite tracks on the album. So generally if I have a song, it becomes a vocal track. If it starts with the music, it's instrumental.
Okay. So then where do you find your vocalists? Because, a lot of artists in EDM, they're going with Matthew Koma, Ryan Tedder, some of the usual names. And you find these guys who we've never heard of before, but are such great vocalists. So where do you find these people?
A lot of those kind of vocalists are really good. I've got nothing against those guys.
Oh, no.
I do find with the very well-known vocalists, it's
where do you find them?
Well, I think I was going to say with those guys, say your very well-known names that you mentioned earlier, it is a bit like Joey from Friends. He can do anything, but you're still Joey from Friends. And I kind of prefer to have somebody.
You don't want anyone with a stigma.
Not a stigma, and I don't necessarily want people who come with baggage. Yeah. I don't want people to go, hey, it's good, but it's not as good as the track he did with Zed or whatever. So if you find somebody that's never done electronic music before, firstly, you haven't got any of that. and secondly, you get to bring somebody new into this world. So, you know, it's happened in all different sort of ways. Sometimes it's been people who I've heard singing in like a bar, playing guitar. That was LJ, who sang Beautiful Rage. She's like
you saw him live in the bar.
Yeah, she's like a pub singer. She was kind of the London.
So you just handpicked her right from the front.
Yeah, she had a great voice, chilled out, and I needed that voice for the record. Christina was a friend of my sister's, Christina Novelli. And again, she knew nothing about electronic music. She'd never done electronic. She'd written this amazing acoustic song called Concrete Angel, and I was like, fuck, that's a potential dance anthem. It just needs to be produced.
She already had Concrete Angel before she hopped on it.
Yeah, I don't... Dynamite, like the song was written by us both. Concrete Angel, the lyrics and the vocal, all hers. And then I just came in and made it electronic.
And there were 4 years between your first album, Northern Lights, and your second album, Drive. And you've said since that, you know, you didn't want to wait that long for your third album. You wanted it to be more 18 to 24 months.
Right, yeah.
So can we assume that you've already started working on your third album?
You know what? I'd go as far to say I've written all of the music. Yeah, there's a few vocals we're still working on a little bit. But, you know...
So how far away are we from seeing it?
You know, I'd like to have it finished around March. And if I finish
March 2015.
Yeah, and if I finish it in March, it would probably be released like around July, because it takes a few months for the wheels to turn. But yeah, you know what? When I did Northern Lights, I was very much like an opener DJ. I didn't have that many shows, and then when I made the album, all of a sudden I was like fucking doing 15 gigs.
120 shows.
Yeah, and like I had no time for the studio anymore. So it took me probably 4 years to work out how to live this heavy touring life when you're playing.
So doing.
Exactly, while still making records, yeah.
So, should we expect it to be more in line with Drive or Northern Lights, the third album?
You know, I'd like to go in both directions. I'd like the radio records to be even bigger and better and more radio friendly, but I would also like to explore the Firebird side of my music, which is almost like kind of an Eric Prydz, 8 or 9 minutes kind of progressive instrumentalism, but still melodic. That's something that really excites me, so ideally I'd like to have 4 or 5 of those.
So and then, a bit of a mix of
then 5 or 6 big, strong kind of vocal anthems.
And you're often credited as one of the first DJs to start a podcast, which is something we see with every DJ these days.
Right, yeah.
So, why did you start it, and why do you feel that was important? Why did you feel that was something you needed to do at the beginning of your career? It
basically was I wanted to start a radio show.
Okay.
But I didn't want it to be the same as everyone else's. So I didn't want to start one that would just be like Armin's. A lot of people copied that format, and I just didn't want to be like another person going, here's a state of Gareth. And, it just felt lame to me. So I was like, right, what can I do that was different? I'd heard about this new format that a few people were fucking with called podcasting. I knew nothing about it, but then when I realised it automatically downloaded to your computer, you didn't need to tune in at any set time, that made sense for me. So I always miss my favourite shows, because I was never there. So I was like, you know what, let's give it a try. I never knew if there was... I did episode 1, never even knew if there was going to be an episode 2. There was no grand plan. It was just like, hey...
We're just trying something.
Yeah, the technology's interesting. Let's make a little show and see how we do. And yeah, that was 2006. So 8 years later, 300 episodes, here we are.
Podcast, exactly.
Thank you.
So, most DJs these days, they kind of just pick up a computer, start tinkering with, whatever program, and they become a DJ. But you have punk rock in your background, you have classical music in your background. How do you feel that helps you as a DJ, and do you think it helps you as a DJ?
Not necessarily. It really depends. Some people may benefit from it, others don't have that influence and do a fine job. Classical music definitely helps with writing, because it will tell you how to get the sounds in your head into a computer, which is not always that easy. I think classical, though, is also like a blessing and a curse, because classical music is not about writing, it's about learning the greats. And sometimes in order to be original, you actually have to unlearn all that shit you've been told, like this is how you make music, to make you
forget about it.
You have to forget about it, because otherwise you'll make music that sounds like music that was made before, and you won't do shit that's original. So I think anybody I know that's classically trained has had that kind of thing to get over.
And you've been pretty outspoken about, the current state of EDM, how, while it might be well produced, it's all very clinical, it all sounds the same, everyone's kind of making those main stage, big room tracks. So with Drive, you want to make something different, more melodic. Do you think that's where EDM is kind of heading? Do you think more people are going to head in the direction that you headed, more melodic tracks, more vocals, rather than those main stage, huge drops, big beats?
Yeah, I would kind of hope so. Yeah. I mean, the huge drops has been fun, but I think we're done with it.
Yeah.
But
people are still doing it.
No, people are still...
And the audiences are still loving it.
People are still doing it, and the audiences are still loving it. But things never happen quickly.
So it's shifting towards more.
Yeah, and dance music never changes. immediately it'll start with a few people going, you know what, I'm kind of bored of that sound, let's try and do something different, and then a few other people start doing it, and then all of a sudden you hit a tipping point, and then things will swing. Like, but you know, like I love a lot of that shit, and I still love a main stage banger that is well made and that is good, but I kind of feel in terms of the originality of that style, it's lost it a bit. Like, too many tracks sound like each other.
You can't play like a main stage banger at home, right? Like something like your album Drive is like perfect for at home.
Yeah.
But a main stage banger, it only works when you're at a festival, right?
Yeah, and that was a big part of Drive. I was like, I don't want to make an album that is just for clubs. I want to make something like
you can
listen
to in the car.
Yeah, and also that you can listen to like in years to come. I mean, like a lot of those main stage bangers, you know, they last 6 months and then
they're gone. You want to make something timeless.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know,
it is timeless.
Thank you.
Fantastic album.
You know, people now still tell me that they fucking play Concrete Angel at their wedding and stuff. And when I hear that, like 3 years after it was released, I was like, that's what I want to do.
It really is a timeless track. It's so good. Awesome. So just to wrap up, what's next for you? I mean, I know you're working on the 3rd studio album. When can we expect to hear more music from you?
So, I've got like a really cool kind of instrumental single, which is going to neither be on Drive nor the next album, just going to be a fun one to put out. If you remember Exposure I did back in 2009, this is kind of like a follow-up to Exposure. We're making some change on the label side this year, bringing in like a lot more new artists. Like, this is, I think because I worked so hard on Drive this year, I neglected Garuda a little bit, so that's going to get some love for me this year.
More new artists.
Yeah, we're going to give Garuda a good push, like a little bit of a rebrand, a little bit of a relaunch. Cool. And yeah, man, touring Drive extremely heavily between now and the end of the year, and then I'm going to get heads down on the next.
But in terms of new Gareth music, that single is what we're going to hear.
Yeah, I played it tonight. So if you heard a track that sounded a bit like maybe you didn't know it, it was probably that. So it's like an instrumental. It's kind of like, it is a banger, but it's melodic and it's like it's a pure Gareth Emery track. So yeah, it's going to be good.
All right, well, thank you so much for your time.